Good morning, students. This is the class for the biology class for the 12th, and today I will discuss the chapter biodiversity and the conservation. And in the classroom, I have discussed this chapter, but there are some topics that remain untold, that remain undiscussed. So today I will discuss that untouched topic, as well as I will give the brief idea about the biodiversity according to your syllabus. So first of all, what is the biodiversity? What is the biodiversity? Okay. So biodiversity, regarding the biodiversity, the term biodiversity was popularized by the sociobiologist. There was a sociobiologist, that is the Edward Wilson. Edward Wilson. And this Edward Wilson was the biologist, sociobiologist, and he popularized the term biodiversity. Watson popularized. The term biodiversity. So dear students, just remember the scientist name. In this chapter there are the 3 or 4 scientist names that have their contribution, that have given their theories regarding to the biodiversity. So just remember them. From that there may be chance to ask the questions. Okay. So biodiversity. What is the biodiversity? What is the biodiversity? So biodiversity means there is the diversity word. In that there is the diversity word, and this diversity word refers to the variation and the variability. Variation or variability. Variation or variability means the sum of the variabilities in atmosphere, in an ecosystem, that is known as the biodiversity. These variation can be studied with the different ways. There are the 3 different ways on the basis of the biodiversity can be studied. The first type is known as the genetic biodiversity. Genetic biodiversity. Species biodiversity. And last one is the ecological biodiversity. There are the 3 different biodiversity. First is the genetic biodiversity, species biodiversity, and the ecological biodiversity. What is the genetic biodiversity? So genetic biodiversity refers to the means if a single species show high diversity at the genetic level over its distribution. If a single species shows the high diversity over its distribution, that is known as the genetic biodiversity. And for example, in your book there is the example is given, that is the Rolfia bometeria, a plant. Rolfia bometeria. Rolfia bometeria. Rolfia vomitaria. Vomitoria. Rolfia vomitaria. This Rolfia vomitaria is medicinal plant, and these are found in the Himalayan range. Medicinal plant found in the Himalayan range, and they shows the genetic diversity. Means if their distribution is changed, the component which is present in the Rolfia vomitoria, that the composition of that content will also vary. The composition in the Rolfia vomitaria, there is an active chemical substance is present, that is known as the resorpine. In the Rolfia vomitaria, a chemical substance that is known as the resorpine. That is the chemical substance, and these chemical substances are medicinally used. These chemical substances are present in that, and their concentration vary according to their distribution in the Himalayan range. In some range of the Himalaya, their concentration, the same species have the concentration is the maximum, but in the same species there is the another distribution, another range of the Himalaya, the content of this vesperine is the less. Okay, so the single species, in a single species, the single species shows the genetic variation, high level of the genetic variation when there is in over the distribution range. Okay, the example is the Rolfia vomitoria. Another example is the rice. Rice has the different strain, and their different strain shows the genetic diversification. There is the mango plant that also shows the genetic diversification. Another is the species diversity. In the species diversity, the diversity shows in the species. For example, the Western Ghat have the greater amphibian diversities than the Eastern Ghat. Ecological diversity means at the ecological ecosystem level in India, that there are the diversity is shown. That is the means the ecosystem according to the, if there is the mangrove region, so the mangrove forest is present. There is the ocean region. In the ocean region, there is the corals are present, coral reefs are present. Okay, there is the wetland is present. So, and if there is a desert is present, so there are the different type of the ecosystem are present, and in the different ecosystem there are the different type of the variation, different type of species are present that shows the variations. Okay, if we discuss about the species, is how many species are present on the earth in India. So if we discuss about that, so as per there is the data of the IUCN stands for the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. According to the IUCN, there is the data of the species of the plant and animal, that is the 1.5 billion approx, or more than 1.5 million of the plant and species are present, and there are the most of the plant and species that are still to be discovered, not discovered at it. Some of them are the not discovered, they are still to be discovered. In that plants and animals, there are the invertebrates, vertebrates. In the animals there is the invertebrates, and in the plants there are the plants are. These are the estimated range. There is the estimated range, and these estimated range of the species of the plant and animals are given by the Robert May. Robert May is he is also biologist, and he has gave the estimated number of the species of the plant and animal, that is the 7 million diversity. 7 million species diversity are present on the earth. In the species diversity, if we discuss about the animals, number of the animals and the number of the plants, so out of them there is the animals number are maximum, means overall diversity there are the 70% of the diversity is the animals. 70%. Biodiversity species, if we talk about the species, that is the animal species, and then the plant species. So there are 70%, more than 70% are the animal, more than 70% are the animal, and there is only 22% are the plants. And in that 70% of the animals, the 70% are the insects. 70% of insects, and remaining 30% are the another organism, like the vertebrates, like the mollusca, echinodermata, other organisms. But in the 70% there are the insects. So the population of insects on the earth is the very largest population. And you have studied at these insects we studied under the phylum Arthropoda, and you know that the phylum Arthropoda is the largest phylum. That's why, because this phylum Arthropoda means these insects cover the 70% of the biodiversity of the total earth. That's why the phylum Arthropoda is the largest phylum. During the estimation of the number of species of the plants and animals, the plants are the 22%, and in that plants there are the fungi, and these fungi is the maximum. The number of the fungi is the maximum than the other vertebrates like the amphibians, fish, reptiles, aves, and the mammals. The fungi number is maximum than all the vertebrates. The number of fungi is maximum than all the vertebrates, that is the fish, amphibians, birds, reptiles, and the mammals. At the time of the estimation of their numbers, the prokaryotes are not included in that. In that, the prokaryotes are not included. Because in the prokaryote there are the most of the microbes, they are not suitable for they are not identified as a microbial species, and they are not suitable for the culture into the culture media in the laboratory, the culture media or in the laboratory. Means first thing, means prokaryotes are excluded in that number, estimation of that number. The prokaryotes are not included in them because there are the two reasons. Why the prokaryotes are not included? So prokaryotes are not included because in that the prokaryotes are not suitable for the identifying as a microbial species, and many species are simply not cultured under the laboratory conditions. These two aspects, due to these two aspects, the prokaryotes are not estimated in this range, in that estimation. Now, pattern of the biodiversity. Now, pattern of the biodiversity. So, in the class we have discussed there are the two patterns of the biodiversity. Okay, that is the first latitudinal gradient, another one is the species area relationship. Latitudinal gradient, another one is the species area relationship. Species area relationship. Latitudinal gradient says about the biodiversity. If we move from the tropical region to the polar region, the biodiversity decrease. That means, suppose that is the diagrammatic representation of the globe, and in that globe at the center there is the equator, and from this equator there is the 23.5, that 23.5 north, and 23 and half, that is the south. These are known as the tropical region. Tropical region. After that, temperate region, and after that polar region. Temperate region and polar region. So when we move from the tropical region to the polar region, either in the south to the north, so the diversity will decrease. Means the diversity is the maximum at the tropical region. Diversity is maximum at the tropical region, and when we move from the tropical region to the temperate region, either in the south or north, the polarity will be decreased. Diversity will be decreased. That is the latitudinal gradient. So what is the region of the maximum biodiversity? Now what is the region of the maximum biodiversity as the tropical region in comparison to the temperate or the polar region? So there are the three regions. The first region, the polar region. In the polar region, there is the glaciation will take place, and due to the glaciation, there is the disturbance will take place, and due to the disturbance, there is the loss of the biodiversity will be. But in the tropical region, there is the no glaciation takes place, and due to the no glaciation, the biodiversity remain constant. That is the first thing. Okay. Second, in the temperate region, there is the less seasonal variation. This less seasonal variation also causes the loss of the biodiversity. And third reason, the incidence of the light. The tropical region receives the maximum light. This tropical region receives the maximum light. At the tropical region, the light is the maximum. Solar radiation. Maximum solar radiation at the tropical region, and this solar radiation, due to the solar radiation, you know that with the help of the light, the green plants synthesize their food material, means they have the survival aspects. Solar radiation. Maximum solar radiation is present, and due to the maximum solar radiation, high energy is available, high solar radiation will be available, so the productivity will increase, and this increased productivity help in the improvement of the survival of the biodiversity. That is the latitudinal gradient. So just remember these 3 points. First, there is the polar region. In the polar region, there is a continuously glaciation takes place, and that glaciation causes the disturbance in the biodiversity. As a result, the biodiversity loss. Second, in the temperate region, there is a less seasonal variation to the tropical region, and due to the less seasonal variation, that less seasonal variation causes the loss of the biodiversity. Third, there is in the tropical region, so solar radiation is the maximum, that is the high energy level is present, and due to the high energy level, the productivity is the maximum, and due to the maximum productivity at the tropical level, in the tropical region, there is the maximum biodiversity in comparison to the polar region. That is the region. Next is species area relationship. What says species area relationship? So this species area relationship was defined by the scientist, that is the Alexander von Humboldt. Alexander von Humboldt. This Alexander von Humboldt defined the species area relationship, and this species area relationship is suggested that if the area increase, the number of species will increase. And he represented this with a graph. They suggested that area will increase, there is a species, and in that there is the area. So he suggested that if the area increase, the species will increase. First thing, he suggested that area increase, so species will increase, the number of species will increase, but at a certain limit. At a certain limit, if the area will increase, the species will remain constant. The species will remain constant, and they will make the hyperbola, rectangular hyperbola graph. Means the Alexander von Humboldt explained the species area relationship, and he represented this with the graph. And in that graph, he represented that if the area increase, so its number of species will increase, but at a certain time, and after a certain time, the species will not grow, species will not increase, species will not increase, even the area increase. Okay, and the graph will form, that is the rectangular hyperbola graph. Just remember that rectangular hyperbola graph. Which type of graph? Rectangular hyperbola graph. And he represented this by a equation. These are represented by equation. These are represented by equation. The equation is C is equal to S A to the power Z. C is equal to S A to power Z, where S represents the species richness, S represents the species richness with number of the species, A represents the area, and C represents the y-intercept, and there is the Z represents the slope. That slope line is represented by the Z. That is the species area relationship. He also suggested that this species area relationship graph will show a steeper line. This will show a steeper line. A steeper line. And he represents this with another equation, like the log equation, that is the log C is equal to log S plus log Z log A. Log is means if the species, we find the species area relationship in a short area, so we will find the rectangular hyperbola graph, and if we calculate the species area relationship in a large continent, so we will find a steeper line. Means the value of Z will be changed. Means for a short area, the value of Z will range from the 0.1 to the 0.2. And for the large continent, the value of the Z means that slope value will be changed, and this slope value will change from the 0.6 to the 1.20. 1.20. Okay. So in the biodiversity, we will discuss about the tropical forest biodiversity in the India. So there is the mammals and the birds biodiversity. The Z value will be the 1.1.5, means that will be the steeper line. In the steeper line, there is the question: what does this steeper line represent? So steeper line represent the richness of the area. The richness of area, species richness increase as more the area increase in respect to the area. Means as the species increase, as the area species, the richness is also species. Species of richness also increase. This is steeper line represent. Okay, that is the biodiversity pattern. Two different biodiversity pattern. Next, there is the loss of biodiversity. So dear student, in the loss of biodiversity means biodiversity are lost due to the human activities. Most of the biodiversity are lost by the human activities. We are the human beings, and for our uses will lose the biodiversity either by the economical value, because we know that the biodiversity has the economical value. Some of the biodiversity they are used as the medicines, some of them are used as the economic view. So we exploit our biodiversity, and due to the exploitation by us, the biodiversity are lost. And due to the loss of the biodiversity, most of the species is going to be extinct. So just remember, in your NCERT, some examples of the extinct biodiversity are given in the topic loss of biodiversity. Remember, student, because the some question, the 1 marks question can be asked in your examination. Give the 2 example of the extinct biodiversities. Okay, so in that there is the extinct biodiversity like the dodo Mauritius, quagga Africa, Thalissian Australia, and stellar sea cow in the Russia, and there are the 3 subspecies of the tiger, Bali, Java, and Caspian. These are the extinct species, and these extinct species, they are registered, they are stored, their record, their information are stored in the book that is known as the Red Data Book. Means there is the Red Data Book, and the Red Data Book store the information about the endangered species, rare species, and the vulnerable species, because these species are listed, and these species are trying to protect, and these are concerned to protect them. They are protected so that they may remain in the biodiversity. They cannot be extinct. To protect them, okay, so they are listed into the Red Data Book, and these Red Data Book are prepared by the IUCN. Next, loss of biodiversity. So what causes the loss of biodiversity? How does biodiversity loss? So in that, the biodiversity loss takes place due to the habitat loss and fragmentation, loss of biodiversity. So first, due to the change in the habitat, if we change the habitat, change in the habitat or fragmentation of the habitat, means if the biodiversity species will change each and every time, their habitat will be changed, so the biodiversity will lose. They will not adjust with that condition, and there may be the chance to lose the biodiversity. If there is the fragmentation takes place, means the large species can be fragmented into the number of the small species, so there they also cause the loss of the biodiversity, because if they are together, so they are dependent one upon another, but if they are separated from each other, so there may be the chances to be the loss of biodiversity. They cannot fulfill their requirement alone. Okay, another is the overexploitation. Due to the overexploitation, there is loss of biodiversity, Another is the over exploitation. Over exploitation. We use the natural resources. We are the human beings and we use the natural resources, and if we over exploit the natural resources, so the biodiversity will be lost. If there is an invasion of the alien species, third point, invasion of alien species. Invasion of alien species. If any outdoor species come in the biodiversity, so that biodiversity cause the loss of the previous biodiversity, existing biodiversity. Okay, for example, there is the Congress tree, Lantana, Iconia. These are the alien species. There is the one another example, African catfish, that is the Clarius garipinus. Clarius garipinus. This Clarius garipinus are also the invasion species. They affect the population of the catfish in the Indian river. Indian catfish, population of the Indian catfish will be affected. Okay. Next, biodiversity conservation. Biodiversity conservation. What is the need to conserve the biodiversity? What is the need? So there are the three aspects. First, narrow utility. Second, broad utility. And third is the ethical approach. We know that we are the human beings and we use the natural resources. And in the natural resources, some of the biodiversity are used, some of the plants are used for the medicines, some of them are the economical benefits. They are used. So these comes under the narrow utility approach. Means the use of for the economical purpose, use for there is the medicines, there is the exploitation of there is the requirement of these natural resources and we obtain from the plants, so the biodiversity must be maintained, biodiversity must be conserved. Broad utilities. We know that we require oxygen for the survival, and this oxygen we obtain from the plants. So plants during the process of the photosynthesis release the oxygen, and this photosynthesis process comes under the broad utilities. Oxygen requirement comes under the broad utilities. And in the world, the largest forest is the Amazon forest. And from these Amazon forest, there are the 20% of the oxygen are produced by this forest of the land. 20% of the oxygen alone produced by the Amazon forest from the land, on that land. That is the broad utilities. Next, ethical approach. So, in the ethical approach, if we say that there is no microorganism is there that are useless. Each and every microorganism have some value. Some they have some intrinsic value. So it's our moral duty to protect them, and we think about we ensure for their well-being. That is okay. That is about the biodiversity. In this chapter, there is the Importance of biodiversity. There is the one topic in the importance of biodiversity, and in that importance of biodiversity, there is the two scientists, that is the David Tillman and the Paul Ehrlich. Two scientists. Just listen about the approach, their approach. David Tillman. David Tillman suggested about the species, stability of the species. It was earlier suggested that the communities with the more species generally tend to be the more stable than those with the less species. It was suggested earlier that the communities which have the more species, that is the more stable in comparison to the less species. And regarding to this, the David Tillman suggested that, and he performed their experiment in the outdoor plot and provided a tentative answer. And Tillman suggested that more species shows less variation in the total biomass. Means the more species, if in any community there is the more species, there will be the less variation, and if there is the less variation, so they will survive, there is the stability will be the more. As well as he also suggested that increased diversity contribute the higher productivity. There is the two things. David Tillman concept that there is the more species, less variation. More species, less variation. And less variation, that is the stable. Another thing, more biodiversity, increased biodiversity, higher productivity. Increased higher. That is the two aspects of the David Tillman. Okay, these are aspects. Okay, means overall from this it was suggested that if there is the rich biodiversity, so the rich biodiversity is essential for the ecosystem, not only for the ecosystem, but these are also helpful for the human beings. These are also helpful for the human beings. Okay, we have studied in the ecosystem there is the food chain, and in the food chain we have studied that if any trophic level is removed, so you know that there is the food chain will be affected, the complete ecosystem will be affected, the ecosystem will be damaged. So similarly in the ecosystem, in the biodiversity, in that biodiversity there are the species are present. If any species are removed from that biodiversity, so the food chain will be affected. There is a one question is given in your book. If there is a 20,000 of the ant species, and out of this 20,000 there is only the 15,000 are remains on the earth, so what happened? There will be happen. The number is reduced at 5,000. 5,000 number of the ant is reduced, and this reduced number affect the food chain, and they will affect the ecosystem, not immediate but after some time. An answer for this question, there is another scientist, there is the Paul Ehrlich, and Paul Ehrlich gave the hypothesis, that is the rabbit popper hypothesis. Robert gave the hypothesis Rabbit Popper hypothesis. So what is the Rabbit Popper hypothesis? In that they use the a term. He take an example of the aeroplane. To define this hypothesis, he took an example of the aeroplane. And he suggested that this aeroplane is an ecosystem. इस एरोप्लेन को उन्होंने इकोसिस्टम मान लिया. This aeroplane is the ecosystem, and in that ecosystem, in that aeroplane there is a rabbit. Rabbit means key, not bolt. That is the species of that ecosystem. वो इस ecosystem की species है. So what happened? He suggested that during the traveling, some passengers start to popper. Popper means to remove. निकालना शुरू कर दिए the rabbits from the aeroplane. And if that rabbits are removed, so if that rabbits, removal of rabbits, poppering of rabbits can threat to the aeroplane immediately? No, not immediately. Not immediately. अगर तुरंत पॉपर्स को निकाला जाए तो एरोप्लेन अफेक्टेड होगा? नहीं होगा. But after some time, one by one, continuously this process will take place, so this will treat the aeroplane safely. तो फिर क्या होगा? एरोप्लेन की सेफ्टी अफेक्टेड होगी, थ्रेट होगी. A situation will be there at the time the plane may be the crash. So similarly, in the earlier question I have discussed that there are the 20,000 of the population or 20,000 species of the ant, and out of these 20,500 are removed. Only the 15,000 are remain. So is that can affect the biodiversity? Yes, they will affect, but they will not affect them immediately. Similarly, means if the poppering of the rabbits will take place in the starting, they will not affect the safety of the plane, but this process will continuously, so they will affect the safety of the plane, and the safety of the plane will also determine which rabbit is popper. Which rabbit is popper? Means the rabbit either poppered from the seat, the rabbit either poppered from the windows, or rabbit either poppered from the wings of the plane. Understand? Means बायोडाइवर्सिटी के लॉस होने की इस बात पे डिपेंड करता है कि कौन सी स्पीसीज लॉस हो रही है, किस स्पीसीज का लॉस हो रहा है, किस स्पीसीज से वो इकोसिस्टम बिल्कुल स्टेबल है. हाईली स्टेबल स्पीसीज अगर इमीडिएटली रिमूव हो जाए, सो द इकोसिस्टम विल बी थ्रेटेड इमीडिएटली, एंड इफ द सपोर्टिव स्पीसीज विल बी द poppered simultaneously, so the ecosystem will thrive after that time. Okay, just like in the plane. अगर प्लेन से क्या है, सीट से, विंडो से राइवेट्स को रिमूव किया जाए तो, और रिमूव करते करते हम विंग्स तक पहुंचे तो क्या होगा? विंग्स की सेफ्टी थ्रेट होगी, बट आफ्टर सम टाइम. बट डायरेक्टली इफ वी डायरेक्टली रिमूव द राइवेट्स from the wings of the aeroplane, so the aeroplane safety will be there, threatened immediately. So that is the similarly in the biodiversity, which species is extinct from the biodiversity that affect the ecosystem. So that is the total biodiversity. After that, there is the conservation of the biodiversity. In the conservation, we have discussed about the ex situ and in situ conservation. And in situ conservation, I have discussed about the conservation of the endangered species in their natural habitat. And ex situ conservation means there is the conservation of the organism apart from their natural habitat. Okay, so what are the natural habitat? So natural habitat are the biosphere reserve, wildlife, national parks, okay, sanctuaries. These are the natural habitat. But the another habitat apart from the natural habitat for the protection of the endangered species, that is the zoological park, botanical park, wildlife safari. These are the places at the places the endangered species are kept and protect them. So that is about the biodiversity, dear students. So learn this chapter, read thoroughly, and if you have any doubt, so you can ask me in the further class, next class. Thank you.